Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Montreal, Canada for Reason to Resist on July 7th, 2025 with my latest rant of the week. The subject of my rant this week will be twofold. First, I'm going to offer some critical observations on the alternative anti-imperialist media, which for purposes of brevity I will refer to during this rant as the AIM. And secondly, I'm going to offer some critical commentary on a particular analyst within the AIM who recently appeared on the Danny Haiphong show. The subject matter is one that I think it's fair to say is rather delicate, being myself a member of the AIM, somebody who operates in the alternative media space, focuses upon anti-imperialism, the project of Western hegemony, and so forth. And I want to be very clear about the spirit in which I am offering the criticisms you are about to hear. I believe strongly, and I cannot stress enough, that the AIM makes an invaluable contribution to the public's understanding about geopolitics, international relations, war and peace, matters that are of the utmost importance to people alive today and to future generations. And in fact, whatever my criticisms may be from time to time of the AIM or particular commentators within it, I encourage people to rely to the greatest possible degree upon the AIM for their understanding about what is happening in the broader world, but to do so obviously with a healthy dose of critical thinking and independent thought, and not simply to accept blindly what they hear from any source, whether it be the AIM or otherwise. And I want to say in particular that although I'm going to focus on an interview that Danny Haiphong did with a particular analyst in this particular rant, I myself have a very high opinion of Danny's show. And if you don't actually watch Danny Haiphong, I encourage you to do that. And also, I have a favorable opinion overall of the analyst, Mark Sleboda, whom I'm going to criticize today. So again, my objective here is not to discourage you from relying upon the AIM or watching this particular program or any other program in the AIM. My goal actually is to make the content of the AIM better. And in order for that to happen, we have to be willing to criticize in a respectful and constructive manner each other, and also, frankly, ourselves from time to time. So it's in that spirit that I am conducting this rant today, and I want to be very clear about that. Now, I'm going to show you an excerpt from a recent interview that Danny did of Mark Sleboda. But before I do that, I just want to say a few words about Mark. If you don't know who Mark is, I understand that he's a U.S. citizen. He was born and raised in the United States, that he served many years ago in the U.S. Navy. He then went on to develop, both through formal education and experience, considerable specialization in international relations, particularly insofar as it pertains to the Russian Federation. And he obviously has a significant degree of military expertise. And although I disagree in the strongest possible terms with what Mark has to say in the excerpt I'm going to show you, I think Mark nonetheless makes many valuable contributions to the public discourse around international relations and the alternative media, particularly insofar as the depraved NATO proxy war in Ukraine is concerned. So I don't want to be taken to be rejecting everything and anything that Mark has to say. Far from it. I'm going to focus on this one particular exchange, which I found very, very troubling. So here's what happened in that exchange.
I've said it on my own channel. I'll say it here. It's a black pill that a lot of people don't want to hear. But the Palestinians are a doomed people. The Israelis are bent on genocide and ethnic cleansing and the forging of a greater Israel. The United States has been quietly complicit in this slow-moving policy for decades. But now under the Trump administration and somewhat under the Biden administration as well, or the Blinken-Sullivan administration, this has been accelerated and greenlit to an absolutely unimaginable. Trump talking about once all the people are gone, turning it into a vacation, Gaza into a vacation resort. And there is no power on this earth at this time, not Russia, not China, not Ansar Allah and not Iran that can save the Palestinian people. The US and Israel are both nuclear powers. They both have escalation dominance. Russia and China do not have the military power to geopolitically power project into the Middle East to save the Palestinians. They politically support them. They recognize Palestine as a state. They will condemn the US. But ultimately, the Palestinians people in the fate of the US president, and the US president, who, I mean, whatever, it doesn't make any difference whether it's Trump or Biden or whatever else. You know, the US course is set.
Now, just by way of disclaimer, I did not show you the whole segment in the interests of time. The whole segment, that was about, I think, 1.5 minutes long. The whole segment is about a little less than 4 minutes long. I'm going to leave the link to the entire interview in the description of this video so that you can see it, and I encourage you to do that. But what you saw here is pretty representative of what happened during the entire exchange about the future of the Palestinian people between Danny and Mark. And I think it's fair to say that Mark expressed an opinion with an extraordinarily high degree of confidence. At no time during that excerpt did Mark say, you know, the Palestinian people, the odds are stacked against them, or they're not likely to win, but there is a prospect, there is a hope of success. A lot of things are going to have to go right for them to succeed. I'm not optimistic. That kind of qualified language, there was really none of that. It was all, they are doomed, they're finished. There's not a damn thing that anybody can do about it. That was the tenor of the entire exchange. The second preliminary observation I want to make is that throughout the entire exchange, Danny just sat there and, you know, nodded his head as though he were in agreement. And I'm going to come back in the very end of my rant, have something to say about that. Now, the first thing I want to say about this extraordinarily confident opinion that Mark expressed that the Palestinian people are doomed is, why the hell would you have confidence in the ability of Israel and the United States to achieve their nefarious objectives based upon what has happened during the last 21 months? For God's sakes, man, these people are a case study in massive failure. So we're 21 months into this genocidal rampage in Gaza. Has Hamas been destroyed? Has its ability to inflict significant casualties on the genocidal entity's forces been eliminated? No, far from it. In fact, as we reported recently on Reason to Resist, in the month of June, the month that was just completed, the resistance forces in Gaza killed more Israeli terrorists masquerading as soldiers than in any other month since June of 2024. So the trend during the last few months has actually been upward in terms of the Israeli casualties. And that's based upon the killed in action, the terrorists killed in action that we have been told about by the congenitally lying Israeli military. Who knows what the numbers actually were in the month of June? They almost certainly were worse than what we were led to believe. So they haven't defeated Hamas, not by a long shot. Have they secured the agreement of any Arab government, despite all the pressure that has been put on them to accept hundreds of thousands or millions of desperate Palestinian refugees? No. In fact, the Arab world, with all of the problems you have in these autocracies and all of their grotesque failings and their corruption and their moral bankruptcy, there hasn't been any indication whatsoever that Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, any of them would be prepared to accept millions of desperate Palestinian refugees. So where are they all going to go, Mark? Where is Israel going to send them? And is Israel actually going to get away when it's created so much outrage in the world by killing, the official number is somewhere in the range of 70,000 Palestinians? What do you think is going to happen if they actually try to exterminate and do exterminate millions of Palestinian people? The outrage we see now is going to skyrocket. And I'm going to come back to that outrage in a moment. So when it comes to achieving their objectives with respect to Palestinians, so far after 21 months of satanic behavior, Israel and the United States and other depraved Western regimes have failed utterly to defeat the Palestinian people. Now, what about Hezbollah? Oh, well, sure, they inflicted a lot of pain on Hezbollah, but Hezbollah hasn't been disarmed. And in fact, politically, it remains a very potent force. As we reported recently on Reason to Resist, Hezbollah scored some quite impressive victories in municipal elections in Lebanon just a couple of months ago. And if the Israelis actually believed that Hezbollah had been defeated as a military force, you can be damn sure that Israeli forces would be in the south of Lebanon right now, occupying it and cementing their hold on that territory, which they have coveted for decades. But in fact, they've withdrawn. They hardly penetrated at all into South Lebanon, and they withdrew from most of the areas that they managed briefly to occupy, and have made, there's no indication that they're going to try to go back in anytime soon and occupy and exercise permanent sovereignty over South Lebanon. So they haven't defeated Hezbollah, far from it. Now, in Syria, with the enormous help from the West, and particularly the United States with its crushing sanctions, the Israelis did manage to contribute to the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad, who was to some degree pro-resistance and opposed to Israel. But that is hardly a stable situation. And that, that terrorist who proclaims himself with no democratic legitimacy to be the legitimate ruler of Syria, that terrorist in Damascus, al-Jilani, is presiding over forces that are committing heinous atrocities against the Syrian people, particularly the Alawites and the Christians in the country. And that is a situation that could blow up in Israel's face at any time. So it's far too early to designate that as some kind of unqualified success for Israel and the United States. Now, what about Ansar Allah in Yemen? Have they defeated Ansar Allah, even with all the help that the Americans gave them? No, not at all. In fact, the Ansar Allah movement fired a ballistic missile into Israel just as the genocidal war criminal Netanyahu was jetting off to Washington for his most recent powwow with the Donald. So far be it from any knowledgeable observer to claim that Israel has succeeded in quelling Ansar Allah in Yemen. And then, of course, there's the ultimate debacle from the last 21 months, and that's Israel's attempts to overthrow the Islamic Republic, because that's exactly what it was trying to do. Not only did it not overthrow the Islamic Republic, but it managed to solidify support for the current government in Iran and greatly enhance national unity amongst the Iranian people. Not only that, but the Iranians inflicted very significant damage upon Israel. I'll come back to that in just a second. Demonstrated that they can penetrate readily Israel's much vaunted air defense systems, and have probably instilled in a significant swath of the Israeli population some serious anxiety about whether the Israeli military is capable of protecting them. Now, as I mentioned, the Iranian missiles were shown to be entirely capable of penetrating through the multi-layered defenses, air defenses of Israel, which have been bolstered by every imaginable air defense system that the West can bring to bear. And we knew before revelations that I'm going to talk about in a second that Iran had managed to strike the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, the largest refinery, oil refinery in Israel, putting out of action, and there are only two of them in Israel. The Weizmann Institute, which is the technological backbone of the Israeli military, the Mossad headquarters, the so-called Ministry of Defense building, and I could go on and on. We knew about that. Well, we learned a few days ago that Iran also managed to strike a number of Israeli military bases during the so-called 12-day war. Academics at the Oregon State University who specialize in using satellite radar data to detect bomb damage in war zones shared the new data with the UK's Telegraph. It showed that 5 previously unreported Israeli military facilities were hit by Iranian missiles in the north, south, and center of Israel, including a major airbase, an intelligence gathering center, and a logistics base. Israeli media are barred by strict military censorship laws from publishing the truth. And the data nonetheless provided Telegraph also show that the proportion of Iranian missiles that penetrated Israel's air defenses grew steadily in the first 8 days of the 12-day war. This helps to explain why Israel pleaded with the Trump administration for it to intervene in Israel's criminal war of aggression on Iran. So to try to characterize what, and I think Mark would actually agree with this, to what Israel accomplished, so to speak, in its criminal war of aggression on Iran as a success, I think would be a stretch, to put it mildly. A much more accurate description would be an epic debacle. So why would anybody have supreme confidence in the ability of Israel and the United States to achieve an objective so evil, so liable to generate antipathy amongst the global population as the extermination of the Palestinian people? Now, let me give you a bunch of concrete reasons why it would be entirely rational for us to expect Israel to fail in its nefarious genocidal project. Number one, which I've just touched upon, is the fact that Israel, being the rabid dog that it is, which knows no red lines, no restraint, is incapable of accepting defeat, is likely to revive its hostilities against the Islamic Republic. Again, could do so, in fact, at any time with the full backing of the United States, in which case the current crew of military leadership, the people who were called upon to replace those whom Israel assassinated and who are more hardline than their predecessors, according to reliable reports, they are likely to inflict upon Israel retaliatory strikes that are even more devastating and perhaps far more devastating than those that Israel has already sustained. And so one can easily imagine a scenario where Israel's aggression results in a war, another chapter in this war with the Islamic Republic, which basically brings Israel to its knees. That's not hard to imagine at all based on what we've seen thus far. That's one way that Israel could be prevented from achieving its genocidal objectives. Another way in which Israel could be, prevented from achieving its genocidal objectives is a massive downturn in public opinion in the West towards Israel. And in that regard, I want to show you a poll that just came out. This is a poll that was conducted in June of this year. And according to this poll, which the Miami Herald characterizes as a record poll, 37% of Americans, when asked with which side they sympathize more, Israelis or Palestinians, only 37% said Israelis, while almost the same percentage, 32%, said Palestinians. And a third, 31%, nearly a third, expressed no opinion. But what was really striking were the numbers amongst Democrats. According to this poll, 60% of Democrats expressed more sympathy for Palestinians, and a mere 12% showed more sympathy for Israelis. In light of that, can you imagine a Democratic administration coming to power and showing the same level of support for Israel? Whether we're talking about a presidential administration, whether we're talking about House of Representatives that's controlled by the Democrats, or the Senate being controlled by the Democrats, which may well be the way things are going, the outcome of the next midterm elections. Can you imagine them showing the same level of support for the genocidal entity as they have in the past? Maybe they will, but I suspect that that's going to be a lot more difficult in the future. And this antipathy that we're seeing in the West, and particularly in the non-Western world towards Israel, it's at record levels. This has resulted from Israel killing and maiming and terrorizing Palestinians over a 21-month period, when the official death toll amongst the Palestinian population in Gaza is somewhere in the range of, I think, 60 to 70,000 people. If in fact they were to kill hundreds of thousands of people, and the world were to have ironclad evidence or strong evidence that that is the actual death toll, or God forbid, millions of Palestinians, can you imagine the level of hostility in the West, and particularly the global South, towards Israel? Israel is playing with public opinion fire, and it's going to get burnt if it continues to go down this path, and in particular, if it gets any closer to achieving its genocidal objectives. And of course, if there is a massive downturn over and above what's already occurred in public sentiment or sympathy for Israel in the West, Israel is doomed, because this little pipsqueak of a country would have no hope whatsoever of surviving in its current form if it were to lose the support of the United States government and other Western governments. It quite literally depends upon that support for its very existence. And it's not hard to imagine, opposition to Israel becoming so intense in the West in the reasonably near future, and long before Israel achieves its genocidal objectives, that finally governments of the West are forced to downscale dramatically, if not terminate entirely, their support for the genocidal entity. That's a second way in which Israel may lose. A third way in which Israel may lose. Israel experiences a massive exodus, particularly of highly qualified, well-educated professionals who are needed to run its economy and its businesses. And this is a process which has already begun. There are reports, which I've talked about here on Reason to Resist, of many highly mobile Israelis leaving the country with no apparent intention to return. And if enough of them go, how is Israel going to continue to control the Palestinian population, which already constitutes a slight majority of the population of historic Palestine? How is it going to continue to operate its economy? The aggressiveness of the extreme aggression of the genocidal Israeli entity is going to lead to more hostility from neighboring states, including, in particular, Iran. That is going to lead to a higher sense of insecurity amongst Israelis, and that is going to exacerbate the outflow of Jewish Zionists from the genocidal entity. So that too is a way in which they could ultimately lose in their effort to extinguish the Palestinian population or ethnically cleanse Palestine of Palestinians entirely. Another way in which Israel may lose is its economy collapses. It's obviously taken a multi-billion-dollar hit just in this round of hostilities alone. Its debt has been downgraded twice during the course of this genocidal rampage. As I mentioned, qualified professionals are leaving the country in droves. Now its infrastructure has sustained very significant damage. Things like oil refineries put out of action, ports. The Eilat port is now bankrupt thanks to the efforts of Ansar Allah. You could see an economic collapse. That too might lead ultimately to the defeat of the genocidal entity. Then there are the festering problems within Israel's genocide forces. More and more reservists are refusing to serve. More and more of them, of Israeli so-called soldiers, are going to the Israeli media and to the foreign media and reporting the depravity that the genocide forces are engaging in. For example, Sky News in the United Kingdom, no less, just published an interview of an Israeli soldier who said that who did 3 tours of duty in Gaza and said with great regret that he witnessed or was the recipient of orders from commanders that any Palestinians, whether or not they posed a threat, whoever they may be, who entered certain delimited areas, should be shot dead. And that this resulted in the execution of numerous innocent civilians. And you've seen there have been soldiers who have been going to Haaretz, the Israeli liberal newspaper, talking about the horrors that they witnessed and experienced in Gaza. There have been letter signing campaigns amongst Israeli military personnel calling for this genocidal war, although they don't call it a genocide, to be brought to an end, and for the Israeli prisoners of war to be brought home. So you have, and then you have, of course, this intense hostility of the Orthodox Jewish community to efforts to conscript them into the Israeli military. This is a problem which remains unresolved in Israeli politics. So you could see a breakdown of military discipline to the point where it is simply impossible for the genocide forces to achieve its already extraordinarily difficult objectives with respect to the Palestinian population. Now, here's another way in which Israel may lose this war against the Palestinian people, and that is the United States simply becomes incapable of continuing to support Israel the way that it has in the past. And in that regard, the Trump administration, the Trump regime, just managed to pass through the House of Representatives and the Senate a piece of legislation which this quack Donald Trump refers to as the Big Beautiful Bill Act, that is going to send the already gigantic U.S. debt soaring. somewhere in the range of 95% to, according to independent experts, in excess of 120% of GDP. And in fact, there is absolutely no indication that this grotesquely incompetent administration, the Trump administration, these people are clowns, they're buffoons. They suffer from laughable degrees of ignorance, or at least it would be laughable if they didn't, control enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world many times over. They clearly don't give a damn about the American people. They don't give a damn about the health of the nation. They don't give a damn about the sustainability of the debt of the country. It is easy to imagine, and in fact, I suspect that Mark Sleboda would agree that the United States experiences a financial crisis in the near term that forces it, whatever its political leadership may want, to scale back dramatically or terminate altogether its enormous financial aid, much of it coming in the form of military assistance to the genocidal entity. And as I said, the genocidal entity is existentially dependent upon United States generosity. What will happen then? Will it be able to achieve its genocidal objectives in the region? Highly, highly doubtful. Now, here's another and admittedly more remote possibility for how all of this could end in disaster for Israel, and that is that one of the neighboring Arab Western-backed autocracies is overthrown. I'm not predicting that that's going to happen, but in the current circumstances, and particularly if things get worse on the ground in Palestine, I think it's entirely conceivable, although unlikely, that you might see the Jordanian monarchy overthrown, the Egyptian dictatorship. By the way, that already happened once. Anwar Sadat was assassinated by people who were extremely unhappy with his perceived complicity with Israel's apartheid regime decades ago. And if that were to happen, if Egypt or Jordan were to be plunged into a state of civil war and or replaced by a government that is intensely hostile to Israel, that would be a game changer and would create enormous difficulty for the genocidal entity and a huge obstacle to its objective of ethnically cleansing Palestine of Palestinians. And then, of course, there's the possibility that Israel itself, for a whole host of reasons, which I'm not going to repeat here, will descend into a civil war. And you don't have to take my word for it. Leading Israeli figures, including the former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, have warned of the possibility of civil war in Israel. How will Israel accomplish its most cherished genocidal objectives when its population is at war with itself? That would very likely be a situation that the Palestinians could then exploit to achieve their own liberation. So at the end of the day, and this isn't even intended to be an exhaustive list, there are a variety of ways that are readily conceivable that Israel could lose and suffer a strategic defeat. And my own opinion happens to be, and although I can't tell you that I'm certain of this, there are far too many unknowns. The situation is far too volatile for anybody to be certain of the ultimate outcome of Israel's genocidal project. But I myself happen to believe that they are likely to fail and that Israel is hurtling towards a strategic defeat for all the reasons I've mentioned and others. And the one other one that I want to mention above all is the incredible courage and determination of the Palestinian people themselves. I mean, we have seen videos coming out of Gaza of resistance fighters doing things which, from the perspective of courage and determination, are unsurpassed in military history. I can't think of any footage that I've seen from any war zone in my lifetime which exhibits a higher degree of resilience, determination, and courage than what we've seen coming out of the devastated Gaza Strip over the past 21 months. So at a bare minimum, in light of all these considerations, the rational perspective, it seems to me, is if you don't agree with me, even if you don't agree with me that for all of these reasons, Israel is likely to be defeated strategically before it can achieve its objectives vis-a-vis the Palestinian people, certainly a rational person looking objectively at the evidence would say that there are some serious obstacles Israel confronts and that victory for Israel is by no means assured. And yet, as I indicated at the outset, Mark Sleboda seemed to have absolute confidence that the Palestinian people were doomed. That is the word that he used, doomed. Now, let's just put aside all the evidence. Let's put aside all the evidence of what is likely to happen ultimately in this epic struggle between the Palestinian people, their supporters in resistance groups in the region on the one hand, and the genocidal regimes of Israel and its Western backers. Let's put aside the evidence, the evidence we've just discussed. I want to talk a moment about one's moral duties. Now, as I mentioned, Mark Sleboda is, I understand, a U.S. citizen. He was born and raised in the United States, served in the U.S. military. I understand he now lives in Moscow, unless Mark at some point surrendered his U.S. citizenship. I don't know. It's possible he did that. I'm going to assume, for purposes of my discussion, that he is a citizen of the United States. Now, I cannot stress this enough. It's a point I've tried to make before, and I will continue to make it again and again. And this applies not just to Mark Sleboda, it applies to every single person on God's green earth. You have no moral right to abandon the victims of your government's crimes, of your own government's crimes. On the contrary, you have a duty to stand with the victims of your government's crimes. And there is arguably no government on earth, and in fact, I would say no government on earth, not even Israel, which is as responsible for the suffering of Palestinians as the United States government, because without the support of the United States government, Israel could never have gotten away with what it has done to the Palestinian people. All American citizens, including Mark Sleboda, have a profound obligation to do everything they reasonably can to oppose their government's policies and to support the Palestinian people. And it may be that Mark has made some efforts to support the Palestinian people, and I commend him for acknowledging, as he has, that what Israel is doing to the Palestinians is a genocide. I commend him for being consistently critical of the United States government, whether it was the Biden regime or the Trump regime, for its policies vis-a-vis the Palestinian people. But going on air and telling the whole world that the Palestinian people are doomed, particularly when there are concrete reasons to believe that they will, in the end, prevail, that is abandoning the Palestinian people. That is failing the Palestinian people. What you are basically doing, Mark, in saying this with supreme confidence, despite all the evidence to suggest that Israel is, in fact, the party that is doomed in this conflict, what you're doing is you're demotivating the people who trust your judgment, who are influenced by you, and who would otherwise be investing their time, energy, and money in defending the Palestinian people. You're basically telling them in no uncertain terms that all of their efforts to save Palestinians will ultimately prove to be a waste of time. It may be morally admirable, as you said in that excerpt, that exchange with Danny Haiphong, but what you're quite clearly telling people is that you believe that as a practical matter, it's all just going to be a waste of time, energy, and money. And so a lot of people listening to you who trust your opinion and your judgment are likely to feel demotivated by that, to continue investing their time, energy, and money in defending the Palestinian people. And whether or not it was your intention, Mark Sleboda, by saying this and by expressing this opinion and doing so with such supreme confidence, you are in fact abandoning the victims of your own government's crimes. And for that, I criticize you. And I criticize anybody who does that. We have an obligation as citizens of Western countries, because it is our governments who are ultimately responsible for this satanic project. We have an obligation to do everything within our reasonable power to stand with the Palestinian people. That means not only criticizing our governments for what they do, it means not voting for political parties in the West who support Israel, not donating our campaign dollars to them, not volunteering our time for those political parties. It means informing ourselves about what corporations are complicit in the suffering of Palestinians and boycotting those corporations. It means going to protests. It means signing petitions in support of the Palestinian people. It means doing whatever you can. In my own case as a lawyer, I'm doing all of those things. Plus, because I have skills as a lawyer, I'm prosecuting a case pro bono against the Canadian government with 6 other pro bono lawyers, alleging that the Canadian government has violated its obligations under the Genocide Convention. I'm doing all that I reasonably can to support the Palestinians. Many other people in the West are doing all they reasonably can to support the Palestinians. And ultimately, it's because we have a moral duty to do that. And saying that the Palestinian people are doomed, despite all the evidence to the contrary, is a fundamental violation of that profound moral obligation. And I hope that if Mark Sleboda listens to this, that he will take that criticism to heart. I intend it in a constructive manner. I don't want to belittle the man. I don't want to discourage you from discounting or from listening to anything that Mark Sleboda has to say. But in this regard, he is very, very wrong. And I object in the strongest possible terms to anybody in the AIM who talks this way about the future of the Palestinian people, and in particular, who comes from a Western country. And the last thing I want to say here is a comment on Danny Haiphong. Again, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Danny Haiphong, and I, in fact, encourage you to watch his program regularly if you don't already do that. But Danny, instead of nodding your head, I say to you respectfully, what you should have done when, Mark Sleboda said these things, basically pronounced to the entire world that there's no hope for the Palestinian people who are sacrificing so much to stay on their land, who are making the supreme sacrifice every day. Instead of nodding your head, what you should have done is you should have constructively challenged Mark on what he was saying. There were plenty of reasons to do so. I suspect, in fact, Danny, having watched your program many times and your fine coverage of the plight of the Palestinian people, that you don't agree with what Mark Sleboda had to say, that you yourself don't believe that they're doomed. And if that is in fact the case, why didn't you challenge him in a constructive manner? We shouldn't be afraid in the alternative media, the anti-imperialist media, of taking issue with the people we bring onto our show, however much we may respect them, when they say things that merit criticism. So at the end of the day, again, I can't say this enough. I offer all of this in a constructive spirit, but man, oh man, I cannot reject categorically enough this whole sentiment, wherever it may be expressed and by whomever it may be expressed, and particularly when it is expressed by a citizen of a Western country, this sentiment that the Palestinian people are doomed. No, my friends, they will prevail. That is a much more likely outcome than their defeat, for all of the reasons that I've stated and others. That's my rant of the week on July 7th, 2025. If you found this to be informative, entertaining, useful, please like this video, please share it. And if you're not a subscriber, I hope that you'll become one soon. We are rapidly approaching 100,000 subscribers. Our goal was to get there before the end of 2025, and it looks like we're going to get there before the end of September at the current rate of growth. And I thank you all for watching Reason to Resist and for your support for our program. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Montreal, Canada on July 7th, 2025.